Hi, it is Janet Fitch, and it is noon on Wednesday Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, so that means it is Writing Wednesday, where I answer your writing questions. Psychological questions, physical world questions, business questions, all that writing stuff. It all because this is where it all happens, and we live in the real world, and all kinds of uh, elements go into the writing of fiction, as we well know. I've just finished AWP 2025 here in Los Angeles and was on a panel uh, with Reina Grande, Lorinda Toledo, who teaches at Otis. Reina is up in Sacramento. Amanda Churchill, who has a new book out, who is based in Austin. And then Karen Connolly, who is a therapist and fiction writer, but she's a psychotherapist and a hypnotist. And she has something called the Courage Process. You can look her up, Karen with a K, Connolly, Lley. And she has something called the Courage Project, where she works with writers. She works exclusively with writers and artists, dealing with their dealing with their difficulties on the therapeutic level. And courage is her focus. So that is very interesting. And she was extremely honest about her process. Um, it was a fascinating time. AWP is a huge writing conference that takes place in different cities at different times. And it was in Los Angeles this time. Huge, it's 10,000, 12,000 people. And for the most part, I stayed in the book fair where all the publishers are and organizations and journals, because that's what right now, that's what I'm interested in more than writing tips. I have writing tips. Um, but to learn about the new journals and new umbrella groups that are working with small presses, and we'll talk about all of that. Hi, Brenda. Love to see you. Um, what it's like to go to AWP, these big, uh, there's nothing quite as um, exciting for writers. People come in from all over the world for AWP, the associated writing programs. But it's not just graduate students and faculty members. It's really widened out to be the writing community as a whole. What it's like is to figure out like what panels you're going to see, who do you know who's going to be there that you haven't seen in years, and you're trying to get a rendezvous together. You want to have dinner. Um, a lot of panels. Keynote speaker Roxane Gay was the keynote this time, and I got to say that um, I did a little differently. You guys know that I do this poetry free write thing called Slow Lightning. Um, so I've been writing poetry, and I'd be feeling closer and closer to the poetry community than I ever have. And so they had a booth, and it was fantastic. This woman, Peggy Dobrier, really is very good at bringing people who are not poets into the poetry world and thinking and writing poetry. She had a thing where just invited passerby to come in, write a poem with a prompt. She has two sets of prompt cards. So, people sat down, 50 people sat down and cold wrote a poem from prompts, and then she would film them reading their poem. And many of them had never written a poem before. She just has a gift for that. So if you're ever interested in a morning poetry and meditation um, uh, practice. Slow Lightning, Peggy Dobrier, is Ad Hoc Inc. at yahoo.com, and I'll write that link if you're interested. Hi, Amy. Good to see you. Well, I saw the people from Community of Writers had a booth, and that's my sort of home away from home. Hi, Laura. Um, Community of Writers is sort of my home away from home. I have been teaching there for some 20 years. And I met my editor there when I was a participant. And most of the writers I know, I have come through the Community of Writers. I met my editor there, first editor. Um, it's kind of where I put my heart. So those people were there, and Slow Lightning with an expanding community there, and it's a time, you kind of are seeking out your community and put a little extra effort into your community, whatever it might be. This is the literary community is mine. It's we take over the convention. They take over the convention center, and in LA, it's usually huge industry, doctors or pharmacy, pharmacy, pharmacologic, pharmacological industry or auto industry or insurance industry, those big conventions. But they were all writers. It was so exciting. There was a huge line when I was checking in on Thursday. Just to get my badge and stuff, a huge line, like Magic Mountain, like Disneyland, that kind of a line. But they were all writers. So it was really fun just to talk to the people in line with me. I met new people, even standing in line to register. It was so much fun. Um, all of these journals show up. I had a long conversation with the people from Deep Vellum, which is out of Dallas. Out of Dallas. Who knew, right? I had a cousin who lived in Dallas who kind of cued me into these people, and they have become an umbrella organization publishing other imprints. So a lot, that's what I'm seeing with the book fair, was a lot of smaller entities, little journals and little publishers are gathering together under the aegis of the largest of them. Um, and so they have the economy of scale, they have better distribution. It's a really interesting time in publishing. So Deep Vellum is now, let's see if I can actually get the different imprints. Deep Vellum. It's nice to do this on my computer instead of at my on my phone, because I can look stuff up and see where else. Okay, so Deep Vellum out of Dallas, Texas, is now an umbrella organization that is um, has taken over several of the imprints, including Dalkey Archive. And I know you've heard me talk about Dalkey. Um, because Dalkey is a publisher, major publisher of important avant-garde work. And I guess the guy who ran it died. And so Deep Vellum went in there and picked it up, and they're publishing an amazing assortment of writers. I think the most important um, uh, avant-garde press since New Directions is Dalkey Archive. I know some of my very favorite books, my behind the desk kind of books. Uh, Palinur of Mexico by Fernando del Paso is a Dalkey Archive. Gilbert Sorrentino, major American avant-gardist, fabulous novelist, is Dalkey Archive. I think Carol Mazo is Dalkey Archive, and so is David Markson. Really important, avant-garde writers. So their work is being reprinted and put out there by Deep Vellum. And Deep Vellum has been known for books in translation. And right now is a very big time for books in translation. If you're translating books, check out Deep Vellum, and in general, check out Deep Vellum. They're fabulous. So I spent some time at their booth talking to them. Poets and Writers was there, and I was just in New York at the Poets and Writers annual big dinner. And I'm a huge supporter of Poets and Writers. I think we all need to be members and subscribe and read Poets and Writers magazine and check out their website. And it's the heart and soul of what's going on in the literary world here. Um, what else did I do? I read poetry out loud to passerby, and there were readings afterwards, and all these quote unquote off sites. So if you ever have an AWP in your town, know that there's a ton of parties and readings that are occasioned by AWP, but are not, you don't have to pay to go. They're in your town. And so there were a number of those, and I certainly went to the one that Slow Lightning sponsored and read. And my husband read his new book on the making of Fitzcarraldo, a poem, full-length poem. Hi, Jeff. Hi, nice to see you. So Brenda, hi. Amy, hi. Laura, I'm happy to see you all. Um, Next year it's in Baltimore, which is going to be interesting. Uh, yeah, so obviously way worth going to. But every event like that, a big um, industry-wide event, it's different when you're at different stages of your career. The first several times I went, I just tried to do everything, and I had major anxiety and me in my which is the best panel. There's like each hour and a half time period. It's broken up into basically hour and a half chunks. There'd be like 30 panels just for that one slot times 3 days. So I just went crazy, like, which one do I want to go to and who's on what, and trying to do everything and just becoming exhausted. Um, but it's super exciting. But the level, it wasn't as frenetic this time, or at least it didn't seem that way to me. But I've been at times where it like hums like bee, anxiety like the bar exam in a major city. Uh, um, but you see people, I mean, there have been AWPs that I have just stood at the top of the escalator, and just seen people I knew and not even going to the panels, just standing there, seeing people I knew, old students and people I'd been in workshop with, and people who've had workshop with me, and people I've known from in various parts of my life. And it's the face-to-face encounter that is becoming less and less prevalent. So that being at something like that, especially after COVID, reminding us how much energy we get from that interaction with others face to face, and really trying to have more face to face interaction with people as we go along. It's going to be really much more important as time goes on to remember to be human, remember to have face-to-face encounters with people that are not mediated by the screen. And here we are being mediated by the screen. We're lucky that we can do this, but there's a downside. And trying to do things that you're face-to-face, it needs to be a conscious decision more and more as people lose their social abilities. Um, so AWP is fabulous for that. So I thought I would talk about my panel, um, which was uh, uh, about getting out of our own way, cultivating a sustainable writing practice. And it was really good. They gave us a nice big big room. I don't know if anybody uh, here had been able to do it, but several Writing Wednesday people were there and came up and introduced themselves. So that was very fun to see them, uh, you guys. Uh, so sustainable writing practice. I mean, what do I not talk about in this Writing Wednesday more than cultivating a sustainable writing practice? But it was nice from the various points of view. So Lorinda was our moderator and had brought this together, knowing it would be something everybody would want to see. Um, so Wendy, hi Wendy, just attended AWP for one day at $25. So worth it. First time. Saturday was plenty. Yeah, one day is way enough. And Saturday is nice because everybody's off work. So a lot of people who hadn't been able to come went. Um, so sustainable writing practice, what everybody was so different. Um, I knew Reina Grande from, there was a program that still exists if you're in LA area. It's called Emerging Voices, and it is taking young writers, not younger, newer writers, emerging. You don't have to be young, thank God. Um, and setting you up with mentors and classes at UCLA and introducing you to publishers. And I mean, it's a really great program for people not born with a silver spoon and great connections and MFAs and all that. Although some of them are MFAs or have gone on to MFA. And Raina was one of them, and she has just balloomed since. She has 3 books out now, and she was talking the idea was she was going to talk about money and what she does for money, getting down to it, because she was somebody who grew up quite poor. She came over, like, really literally wading across the river, across the Colorado, to get into the US, and being undocumented and so forth. um, and so she's gone the whole long way, and has become, she writes, she teaches, she lives in Sacramento. She public speaking brings her money. Like, how does they asked us, where does your money come from? And writers are being much more open about that, because emerging writers want to know how do you sustain yourself? So Raina put it together through teaching and public speaking and sales of her books. Um, Amanda Churchill is a graphic designer full time, and so she makes her money doing graphic design. Um, Karen is a therapist and hypnotist, which is cool because I like hypnosis and I do that. And then myself, I started out as a typesetter, and I tend to like work that isn't about writing, but is somehow tangential. I don't like. I don't. I found, like, I was a newspaper editor, a small town newspaper, and I did that for 2 years. And it was a 24-hour day job. People call you at dinner to come over after dinner and, um, take a picture of their kid caught a big fish, and come over and take a picture of it for the paper. And then you interview the kid and you write up the article. I had a full, 8 pages of articles to write. And I did not have time to write at all. No, and not at all. And then when I quit, I wrote 18 short stories that following year. I just had, it was so pent up. I had never had a job like that was so engaging, involving, and writing, that I couldn't write at all. Some people slowed down when they answered this question. We went down the row. When we went down the row, some people, like, when did you slow down? And the only time I've ever slowed down on my writing was when I had that job, and I just didn't write at all. It wasn't good for me. I do better with a part-time job that doesn't have anything to do with writing. Although I've done a lot of freelancing, uh, I not as productive as when I was setting type, uh, which is typing, and formatting and graphic arts and doing some paste up and stuff like that. Not a lot of those jobs anymore. But I think if I was looking for work right now, I'd be doing like cleaning out people's houses, packing them up for assisted care and handling the donations. And I would be doing that. I would be doing, I'd probably be doing coding or something like that. Uh, Copywriting, like writing about shirts and skirts and stuff like that for catalogs. I think that's terrific work. Good work for poets, that kind of copywriting. Um, Describing menu items for a hotel, that kind of thing. I could see doing that. I would say, I read this most um, tragic Facebook post somebody showed me of a young man in his 30s who'd been writing like really on a high level, publishing in major magazines and the doing some screenwriting, TV writing, and just a super writer. He's really desperate. He cannot work is dried up. He said, I've even applied for janitor positions and not gotten them. I don't know what to do. I just wanted to hug him. Um, he was really starting to get desperate, and I know people who've gotten really desperate, and if you see this happening among your colleagues or friends, really try to open the open the door a little bit more. I think that maybe I shouldn't generalize, and Jeff, you can stop me if this is rubbing you the wrong way. But I think men are more prone to this kind of despair because men are set up to, be a provider, be a caregiver, be a provider, and identify very closely to their ability to pull in the bucks. Although who doesn't, right? Hi, GB. Faulkner worked as a janitor at Ole Miss. Yeah. I mean, I would have said, like, I don't know this person, but I do know somebody who got caught in a very bad depression and it did not turn out well. A journalist who was just overwhelmed by the loss of employment. Um, I think I think that teaching is a hard job for a writer because if you care, you pour out so much of yourself into taking care of other people and their needs, and you're so tuned in that it's exhausting. It's exhausting, and you come home, and many people do that and write. For myself, I like non-writer writing related work. I like things like, you know, what traditionally would be called the trades. Typesetting was a great job, factory work, if you can get it. Um, if I was this young man, 32, I would look into the trades. I would like look up, we have trade schools here, LA Trade Tech. I don't know, many places have VOTech, vocational technical schools. I would learn like electrical or plumbing or um, welding or, something like that. Laying brick, laying concrete. I mean, there's hard physically. If he wasn't 32, if he was 52, I'd go, electrical. Any kind of the trades are really um, much more stable. It can't be done by AI. Massage therapy. I think Karen had a great idea of moving into therapy and hypnosis and working with artists. That was wonderful. Um, um, Brenda says, so true about teaching and writing being difficult to do together. I taught college for 3 semesters, had to stop because I knew I'd never write again. Yeah, when I was teaching at USC, I only taught one class a week. And I worked out ways in which I could limit the amount of bad writing that I was filling my head with, because it was really, sometimes could get really tough. Um, uh, it's, if I was teaching 3 or 4, like people do in community college, that would be really tough on me, or high school. I know people are teaching high school. Um, but that's hard. It's hard for a writer. Um, Myself, I really like a non-writing job. I worked for a PR firm, like a public relations firm that dealt with oversight of construction projects, and somebody had to write up the reports into English. Um, I like that work, calling engineers. They use a lot of acronyms, and it's like no politician office holder can read that. They don't know what that means. You have to find out what it means and figure out a way to explain what kind of projects. But there's very little emotional tie in there. It's just a job, and I like just a job. Amy Tan worked as a business writer, um, being a technical writer. If you could do coding, I probably would have looked at that. Um, Llewellyn says, yes, I identify with other males who made choices in early adulthood to work rather than create. Yeah, and you don't have to. You don't have to, but you have to really think it through. You know, um, because the economy just changes and changes and changes, and AI is going to make it much more complex um, to figure out sustainable living, sustainable work. Um, this is my lint. I don't know who you are, but hi. Is it too late to ask a writing question? Is it, sure, ask a writing question. Happy to hear it. Um, and put your name in there. So, because I don't want to call you Lint. Um, Brenda says, my daughter is an artist, but supports herself as a mail carrier. Wendy says, teaching is performative as well, which makes it tiring. I know Wendy is a teacher, although it drives me into solitude and silence in my writing room. Um, GB Walter, GB says, that's funny. I thought USC took in the brilliant kids into their programs, not rich kids, just quote, talented. Um, I don't know, the program that I had been working in when I started there seemed to be taking everything with with a pulse. And so it was a huge spread of ability. Some people were just incredibly gifted. Some people were, hanging in, and some people were like, they didn't know where to put the period in a sentence. So that was really interesting, trying to teach a mixed class like that. Um, Laura said, I did grant writing for a nonprofit, and that loved that. So grant writing is a great use of writing. So that's tangential, um, but it doesn't use the same juice necessarily as fiction. So that's good. Part-time teaching has been a godsend, says Wendy. High school teaching almost killed me. And Jeff says, yeah, I spent the bulk of my working career in corporate communications, PR, speech writing, occasionally marginally creative, and often very lucrative, but ultimately not satisfying. Well, it doesn't have to be satisfying. It just has to pay the rent, you know. I think waiting tables, bartending, I like the trades, I think I would learn upholstery or something like that out, if I was 32 and was looking for work. That would be what I do. My income comes from uh, royalty income from uh, book sales, but they've gone way down because of Amazon. Way down. I mean, you would be shocked at how little I get from these books. and movie option money, carefully banked. You know, if you ever get a big paycheck and you're a writer, salt that away. Salt that away. Money is time, and it might be a long time till you see another payday like that. So definitely salt it away. Don't go crazy. I remember when I sold White Oleander to the movies, the agent came by to take us to dinner, um, and looked at where I live, this house, and said, "So when are you going to move?" I was like, "No, I'm not going to move. I'm not moving to Beverly Hills." My current husband says, that bad TV or entertainment is run by because these people get a big payday in television and films. Sometimes they get a big payday and they think it's just going to last forever. And they go and they buy really expensive property and then they're working to pay the mortgage. And then, so there's no amount of garbage that they won't write because they need that paycheck. Do not get over yourself. That is my first rule of sustainable writing practice on the financial end is don't spend money, salt it away. Don't get used to an extravagant lifestyle. Don't get a house that you can't afford. Don't, you know, it's hard to say this anymore, but uh, rule of thumb had always been, for me at least, don't buy things on credit. Save up and buy what you can afford. The car, save up and buy that car and not don't incur the uh, the monthly payment. Try not to buy things on credit. Just it's a real way of staying within your means. I know if you pay cash for things, you're more careful than when you just stick the card in. When you have that money that you've worked so hard for, and that means time, the time to write, it keeps you real. So Amy says, I worked at a gym, yoga studio, and taught martial arts. Well, there you go. Sarah says, so were none of the panelists with you the typical MFA grads, now professors? The organizer was. But, when you're a professor, she works at Otis, which is artists. It's an art school. Um, she's young and very energetic. And I think that part of that community is pulls you into creating fiction. So that's something to be said too. Um, and how were you selected for this panel? Sarah asked. I knew her. I met her at AWP, Lauren Toledo, and they needed an older person who started their career in a different world. And, just for contrast, because a sustainable writing practice, I've been writing sustainably, I mean, intensely since I was 21. And I did not take a break except for that job working at the newspaper. I did not take a job. When I had my baby, I was in a workshop. There was actually somebody from that workshop in the audience. Um, when I had the baby, the first place I went after I had the baby was back to my workshop. I was terrified to take any time off my writing because I was afraid that if I got into a habit of how I was going to be a mother without the writing component, that I would never become the writer I wanted to be. So I worked even when she was a baby. Um, so Marie, hi Marie, this is my lint. Marie, when it comes to research for different time periods, do you take any time away from your story, Or do you continue to write and add in the needed content in a later draft? No, I write and research at the same time because it keeps the research rapture under wraps. If you, I mean, history was my undergrad, and I love history. I was thinking very seriously about becoming an historian, and I know my tendency is to follow the research, and that is no good. There is no way I am going to follow things down a rabbit hole, and then you wake up 3 months later, 6 months later, oh, I should have this, I should have this. And then you wake up and go, I can't use any of this. It's distorting the story, it's a mess. There is just no way. So I say do the research. I mean, obviously, you're going to have a basic understanding of the time period of your story historically. Um, you're going to know who is the king, the czar, whatever. You'll know, you know, basically, the broad strokes. But as you write, you only need to know as much as makes that scene make sense. You only need to tell the reader that much. So it makes you focus on what you need for that scene, and it keeps the research from running away with you. So I I do not take time away from the story to do research. I do them in tandem. So GB asks, how many hours per day do you devote to your creative writing? It's hard to say. I would say I get up in the morning, I do this poetry free write thing from 8:30 to 9:30 ish, have breakfast, and then sit down. So I'm writing usually from, say, 10, 9:30, 10 to maybe 2 or 3 with a short break for lunch, no gourmet thing. Um, I'll do stuff in the afternoon, 3 to say 5 or 6, 5 errands and what have you, and then usually write a little bit before I have to start thinking about dinner or other people start thinking about dinner. And then in the evening, it depends on how hot on the trail of whatever I'm doing is. If it's very hot, I will come back after dinner and do some more, maybe 2 more hours. But if I'm not, I do like everybody else. I'll read or watch TV, um, and then rinse and repeat. And the thing is the rinse and repeat part. That I do it over and over and over for however many years it's been since I was 21. Um, and it's the consistency that makes all the difference every day. Because one of the things I said in this panel was that if you when you don't attend to your writing, even a day goes by without you getting in there and doing something. It develops like a shell. And then the next time you go in there, you've got to crack the shell to wake it up, get it moving again. And it might take you a day of just doing that. It's much better to check in every day with the work, change a few verbs, just read it over, make a few changes. So it's alive. When you have a little more time, you can get in and start working. You don't have to like crack it open. So that's uh, that's that's kind of my plan. I thought it was very interesting. Reina Grande uh, works at night. She's a night owl, and she started it because it's quiet at night, and she has a little kid. How how to get that unbroken time, but then she would have to get up and take the kid to school and all, and has worked it out now. I don't know how old her child is, but her husband does the morning, takes the kid to school, gets her up and dressed and takes her to school. So Raina sleeps until noon, then gets up and does whatever her daily thing is, and shopping and errands and all that stuff that we all have to do, clean the house. And then after dinner at 10, she'll sit down and start to write. And she'll work until like 3 in the morning, sometimes all the way till dawn, and then go to sleep and start over. And I thought that was extremely interesting. Um, Working, there's something about, she said, in the middle of the night, she doesn't feel the pull to wash the dishes or, you know, arrange anything. Or it's easier for her to concentrate at night. Um, so find out what your best writing time is. I knew somebody who had a straight job at a bank, like a, at a law firm. It wasn't a bank, it was a law firm that did financial stuff. A former student of mine and quite a brilliant writer. Um, who would get up 2 hours early to write in the morning because he was a morning person, and that, whatever the cream of the day is, that's the time you should be writing. Give that to your writing and give the skim milk to your job. Depends on how you think of yourself, but if you think of yourself as a writer and not a banker or not a primarily a lawyer or whatever, um, give yourself the best part of the day. And something else is see what, when you're a writer, you're home and people are always trying to dump stuff on you. I'm not a volunteer. I don't serve on committees. I don't serve on boards. I'm always being asked if I can be on this committee, or I would rather hang myself than be on a committee and listen. I don't have time to listen to people talk about stuff and argue about whatever. I mean, every place you are has a committee, uh, several committees. And my daughter was in cooperative nursery school, which means I had to work a day to keep the price down. And it was good. I learned a lot about parenting working in that place. But then there was you had to do some sort of other kinds of work for the co-op. And I could be on this committee, that committee, and it's just like I took lawn watering. I would rather just go and water the stupid lawn than be on any kind of a committee. I don't do that. I don't do the PTA. I didn't do any of that stuff. Uh, I'd rather, if I was volunteering, I like to be on the ground handing out the sandwiches. I'll make the sandwiches. I'll mow the lawn. I'll scrub the toilet. I don't mind cleaning the bathroom. I don't mind washing kids' hands. I don't mind doing that basic, you know, worker on the ground stuff. I don't want to be in a committee. I don't want to run anything. I don't want to sit there. I don't, I just can't do that and have time for my work. At my house, other people do the cooking too. I can't, I don't do the whole thing. I'll do my day and I'll wash the dishes on my day. But even a 10-year-old can make dinner for the family. There's no reason that the writer, especially a female writer, has to perform all of these caretaking tasks that other people benefit from. They need to be part of it. And you just have to say, I'll dance with you, you dance with me. It's a two-way street, you know. So that's something. So Brenda says, "Oh, Janet, how do you say no to committees, etc.? I find that so hard." Well, here's an idea. I I was listening to the poet Gary Snyder, the beat poet. And at one point, he became mayor of Bolinas, California. And Bolinas is a real hippie town on the coast, and he had lived there, and he accepted a post doing being their mayor for a while. And he was very good. He's a real smart guy. And people said, "Oh my God, you should go into politics." And he said, "I don't believe in becoming, what is it? Becoming a victim." Thank you, my husband's here. Becoming a victim of my minor talents. So he could have become a politician, but that's not, he was a poet. He didn't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So how do you say no to committees? Just like, oh, no, you don't volunteer, you don't raise your hand. Any volunteers to be on the paper cup committee at the nursery school? If you feel that hand going up, put it down again. And if people try to make you feel bad, it's like, we need the parents to be involved. It's like, I'll bring cupcakes, but I'm not organizing anything. It's that we get such immediate pats on the head when we are good administrators. Oh, yeah, that Janet, she can do anything I throw at her. Don't be that person that's known for picking up everything that everybody else dropped. You do not have to do that. You are a writer, and your work needs you. You know, if you don't feed it, it dies. Nobody else can feed your work, only you can. So you have a responsibility to your work first. Um, let's see. GB says, what I love about writing, one doesn't need a degree, doesn't need approval, doesn't cost a ton of money, doesn't require expensive equipment. Legal pad and a pencil will work. No PhD, no MD. Yeah, writing is a great, you know, it's a great democratic profession, as anybody can do it, but you have to be able to set boundaries with other people. And the boundaries change. It's very flexible. You don't know, if you have a sick parent or a kid that really needs your attention right now, you dance with it. It's not permanent. You don't have to totally give up and say, "Oh, I have to take care of sick kid, sick parent, and the next 10 years are just becoming the slave of this parent." And we all have parents we love, children we love. So it's a dance. Sometimes they need you more. Sometimes you need them to support you. And and if somebody doesn't understand that in your family, that there's a conversation to be had. Um, uh, so GB says, years ago I met Kenneth Rexroth, a real beatnik poet. He worked as a dishwasher on the high seas. Yeah, for some reason there has become this weird I want to say MFA driven idea, because you're spending so freaking much money to get the degree, that there should be the big reward at the end, and you get the professorship and publications, and it's all very uh, pleasant and taken care of. And the idea that especially the Beats were really right about this, in my opinion, is that you have to, the the poet, the writer, um, values the freedom from this system, and finding a way to support yourself so that you can write and you don't identify with your job. It made me crazy. I had a very good friend who worked as a legal secretary for many years, and hated her job, but it was really good paying. So she kept quitting and then going back because the money was so good. But she would say we, we're doing this, we're pursuing this case, we're doing this. And I'm going, Jane, um, there is no we. You're not getting a cut of that. You're not a partner in the firm. It's a job. She is a wonderful artist. And she had to learn to stop identifying with her job because she was doing it because it was a good paycheck, not because she was enamored with whatever kind of corporate law it was. And to stop thinking about to start thinking, oh, this is like I'm the worker here. This is not we. This is they. They want me to do this. I'm doing this, I'm doing that for them. Um, saying yes, Amy says saying yes to other things is saying no to more writing time because, yeah, you have to make a living, but you have to think of the balance. You're dancing with the job and your own work, and your own work is primary. Um, so Marie says, what is your opinion on Instagram poetry? I'm always afraid my work would end up being stolen easily. Instagram poetry. Eh, this is poetry that you've written that you put up on Instagram. I don't think anybody's going to steal your poetry. I'm sorry. It's not the crown jewels. Nobody's going to steal your story, your poetry, or anything. Um, the question is is it the excitement of an instant publication that you don't have to go through the journals, you don't have to go through the vetting, you don't have to have anybody's seal of approval, you just throw it out there? Is that what you like about it? Um, I wouldn't worry about your work being stolen. Um, I would just think about, broadening out to more of a, I like print myself, or a literary journal as well, you know. Um, let's see. Sarah says loving writing Wednesday as it refocuses her in the middle of the week. That's good. The corporate week. Yeah, this is the secret clubhouse, in the garage or wherever you used to have a secret clubhouse, where this is where we really live, right? If you're writers. Um, Aubrey, hi Aubrey. Have you ever watched the movie Moonlight from 2016? I noticed there's similarities between it and White Oleander and wondered if you've watched it yourself. Yeah, it was a beautiful movie. And I always am very concerned with um, kids in foster care and people who have no one to speak for them, and the elderly, and you know, just regular people. You got to stay in touch with real people, or the fiction just becomes garbage, if you ask me. Um, hey, Cassandra! Goodness gracious! I need to stop saying we for my editing job. Yeah, Cassandra is an editor at a very well-known magazine here in LA. It's so hard because the vision of the work falls so heavily on my shoulders. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Um, yeah, that's the problem with being in an editorial position of working on a magazine or newspaper is that you do sort of invest yourself in those stories and in that world. And yet, you have to nurture your own work first. It's a dance with the job, especially an engaging job like that. You get more strokes for interacting with the corporate world. But if you let your own work go too long, you really regret it. So Wendy asks, do you think including a novella in a short story collection increases the chance of the manuscript being published? I don't think it makes any difference. I think short story collections are hard to sell, less so as things go on. I think including a novella in a short story collection is a fine tradition. I think 7 stories in a novella is a really nice looking collection. Also, as people's attention is getting more slender, let's say, um, there's more possibilities of publishing a standalone novella. Melville House Dozen has individual novellas as books, and they're very handsomely displayed in the store. They're small and cute, and, reader friendly. I think novella, something 80 pages long, 60, 80, is starting to sell on its own as a novel. So consider that. Um, But sustainable writing practice was my panel at AWP. And so income is part of it, stable is part of it, like how to notice in yourself when you're starting to panic or when you're starting to block or when you're starting to write garbage. We've talked about this before. There's an axis within the writer between permission and perfection, and we're all trying to be better, better, better. But at a certain point, that demand for perfection sometimes you get a block. Everything just freezes up. My stuff isn't good, it's not good enough. And that's when you have to go back down the axis, back towards permission, giving yourself permission just to write something. Just write something, you know, whatever seems liveliest to you, write that. And then make a mark. That's the whole theme of, or a lot of the theme of Painted Black is, permission versus perfection. Um, and then once the engine starts rumbling again, you don't want to stay there at the bottom end of permission, because at some point you're just getting a bunch of crap. And that is true. Your worry is not entirely unfounded first, but you have to get stuff out. And then you slide a little bit. Can I do this a little better? Can I do a little better? You know? So it's a perennial dance inside you, and you have to notice when you start getting scared, when you start choking up, and then go back to just being good enough. Um, GB says Hemingway and Steinbeck were both newspaper journalists. However, they kept pounding away on their novels. Has anyone in today's group ever heard of those guys who couldn't get MFAs? Oh, yeah. Well, Steinbeck has a fabulous, fabulous book called The Journal of a Novel. And his editor had given him a big notebook, like this, big. And he wrote East of Eden in that notebook on the right hand pages. On the left hand pages, every morning, he would write about working on the book and what he planned to do that day and what his concerns were. A journal, and then he would write that chapter, and then the next day. So you can read the journal of writing East of Eden as well as writing East of Eden. He was well aware of his struggles, and as a writer, you're going to recognize everything that he did. But he wrote every day, and he really returned the sustainability. And he had people who took care of all his needs. Somebody took care of his kids, and somebody took care of his food, and somebody took care of his laundry, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's part of the mix. What's not said. Although he was more aware of it than most. Um, so Sarah says, thanks for the session a couple of weeks ago on audio. I had a section, somebody asked me, is audio reading? Uh, and she says, well, I'm still stubbornly clinging to my paper novels. I've started consuming short stories on audio, and I'm greatly enjoying it. Yeah, how to slip in another book. So anyway, we've come to the end of our time here, and so hopefully thinking about sustainability, and if you have a choice of coming to AWP in Baltimore, that's next year. And I wish you good writing. Thanks for coming. And subscribe if you enjoyed this. Okay, bye.